Today, we're focusing on mastering the three fundamental approaches to valuing real estate. These approaches, the income approach, the market approach, and the cost approach, form a complete toolkit for assessing property value. Whether you're analyzing income property, comparable sales, or replacement costs, these methods provide a solid framework to arrive at a defensible value opinion. By understanding and applying these three approaches, you can confidently navigate the appraisal process and develop a well supported conclusion of value. This core framework is essential for anyone working in real estate valuation. When appraisers determine property value, they rely on three different approaches because no single method is flawless. This is known as a triangulation of value. By comparing results from each approach, appraisers can arrive at a more reliable and credible opinion of value. Properties vary greatly, so each one reveals its value differently. For example, an apartment building is best valued through the income it generates. A house is often assessed by looking at comparable sales, and a new construction is typically analyzed through its cost. Using all three approaches also helps in managing risk, as it uncovers any weak assumptions, unusual comparable properties, or unrealistic projections early on, preventing these issues from skewing the final value conclusion. This comprehensive process ensures a well-rounded and trustworthy appraisal. All right, let's dive into the income approach, which is all about how cash flow tells the story of a property's value. Essentially, the value here is based on the income the property generates and the return investors expect to receive. The key metric we focus on first is the net operating income, or NOI. This is calculated by taking the property's revenue and subtracting both vacancy rates and operating expenses. It gives a clear picture of the actual income the property produces. Then we look at the cap rate, which serves as a market return benchmark. Think of it as the rate investors expect to earn. Lower cap rates generally suggest higher property values because it means investors are willing to accept lower returns for the income generated, usually a sign of desirable, stable property. From an investor perspective, it all boils down to income driving value. The stronger and more stable the cash flow from the property, the stronger the signal that the property is valuable. This approach really puts cash flow front and center when assessing property worth. Here, we're focusing on the income approach to property valuation, which is a fundamental method used by investors. The core concept is that a property's value increases when its net operating income, or NOI, goes up. Conversely, the value decreases when investors require a higher capitalization rate due to increased risk. The formula is straightforward. Value equals net operating income divided by the capitalization rate. This is referred to as direct capitalization, where we rely on one primary income stream and a single market-derived cap rate to estimate the property's value. Understanding these core inputs is crucial because they drive the entire valuation process. Essentially, strong income and a low cap rate indicate a higher property value, while the opposite signals a lower value. This balance between NOI and cap rate helps investors make informed decisions about buying or selling real estate. The market approach focuses on determining what buyers are willing to pay by analyzing real-time buyer behavior. Essentially, we estimate a property's value by comparing it to similar homes that have recently sold in the same market. The process starts with identifying comparable sales. These are recent sales of nearby properties that match in size, condition, and location. Next, we make adjustments for any differences, such as variations in square footage, upgrades, lot size, or the age of the property. Finally, we calculate an average price by reconciling these adjusted comparables to arrive at a supported market value range. The core idea here is that value follows the market, making this approach most effective when there are solid comparable properties available and when buyer demand is active. Here, we're diving into the market approach to property valuation, focusing on comparable sales analysis. The key idea is to compare properties that are similar, like for like, and then adjust for any differences so we can translate raw sale prices into reliable value estimates. The best comparables are those that need the fewest adjustments, making the comparison cleaner and more accurate. We start by matching basic property characteristics, like room count. For example, if our subject property has 3 bedrooms, we want to look at comps with the same number of bedrooms before considering price. Next, we normalize for size differences, like square footage, since larger or smaller homes will affect value. Then, we consider the condition of each property, because updates or renovations can significantly impact how much a buyer is willing to pay. Location and site features, such as a corner lot or additional amenities like a garage and patio, also influence which comps are most relevant and require careful adjustment. These differences are quantified as adjustment factors. Bedroom parity might have no adjustment, but we might add $18,000 for size, $25,000 for condition upgrades, $12,000 for location premiums, and subtract $8,000 for differences in property age. After applying these adjustments, we arrive at adjusted values for each comparable property, which in this example range from $486,000 to $503,000. This helps us establish a defensible value range for the subject property based on market evidence. Now, let's talk about the cost approach. This method focuses on determining what it would cost to rebuild a property from scratch. The main logic here begins with the replacement cost, which is the current cost required to construct the same improvements on the land. To estimate value using this approach, we add the land value to the replacement cost of the building and then subtract any depreciation. Land value is simply what the site would be worth if it were vacant, without any structures on it. Construction cost refers to the current expense to replace the existing improvements, reflecting today's building prices. Depreciation accounts for any loss in value due to the property's age, physical wear, or functional obsolescence, which means a building may no longer meet modern standards or needs. This approach is particularly well suited for newer properties or those built for special purposes, where market comparisons may not be as straightforward. It provides a clear framework to estimate value based on tangible costs and adjustments. Here, we're looking at the cost approach, which is a key method in property valuation. The basic idea involves adding the value of the land to the current cost of constructing the building, then making necessary adjustments. Essentially, the property value equals the land value plus the building cost minus any depreciation. This approach works best for newer properties or special use assets, where there aren't many comparable sales or sufficient income data to rely on. It helps provide a reliable estimate by focusing on the actual costs involved in creating the property, rather than just market trends. Overall, the cost approach breaks down the valuation into clear, tangible components: land value, construction costs, and depreciation, making it particularly useful in certain market situations. When selecting the best approach for valuing a property, it's important to use a method that most closely reflects how the property is actually bought, sold, and analyzed in the real world. The weighting of each approach can change depending on the property type, the quality of data available, and current market behavior. For the income approach, this works best with multi-unit rentals, apartment buildings, and commercial properties like offices and retail spaces. These are typically investor-driven deals where net operating income and capitalization rates are the main focus. The market approach is ideal for single-family homes in active neighborhoods, condos, and properties where there are plenty of recent comparable sales. This approach reflects buyer behavior driven by sale prices and market demand. Finally, the cost approach is most effective for new construction properties with limited operating history or special-purpose buildings that don't have many true comparables. It also plays a key role in insurance, replacement, or rebuild-oriented analyses. Understanding when to weight each of these approaches ensures a more accurate and realistic property valuation. When it comes to valuation discipline, one of the fastest ways to improve accuracy is by identifying the subtle errors that can quietly distort value. Let's talk about some common pitfalls. First, ignoring market trends can lead us to outdated conclusions. To avoid this, it's essential to adjust our valuations for current demand, interest rates, and local market momentum before finalizing any numbers. Second, relying on outdated comparable sales is another frequent mistake. Using recent and relevant sales data is crucial, and we need to factor in any changes in timing, condition, or neighborhood dynamics to keep our estimates accurate. Lastly, structural underestimation often happens when physical issues or capital needs are overlooked. Thorough inspections, appropriate reserves, and realistic repair cost inputs help us verify these factors and build a more precise valuation. Ultimately, accuracy improves when the evidence we base our valuations on is current and reflective of the market realities. Staying up to date is key to disciplined and trustworthy valuation. Here we have a real-world example demonstrating how to value a mixed-use property by applying three different valuation approaches. The property in question includes neighborhood retail space on the ground floor with 6 apartments above it. Since the occupancy is stable and there are recent sales of comparable properties nearby, we have solid data to analyze each method meaningfully. Starting with the income approach, we capitalize the net operating income based on the current rents in place, resulting in a valuation of approximately $3.18 million. Moving to the market approach, we look at adjusted sales data from similar mixed-use properties, which gives us a slightly higher value of about $3.26 million. Finally, the cost approach combines a land value with the depreciated cost of replacing the building, producing the highest estimate at roughly $3.41 million. Notably, there's an observed spread of $230,000 among these methods, highlighting the importance of considering multiple perspectives when valuing mixed-use assets. This helps ensure a well-rounded and informed decision-making process. Now, let's focus on the valuation synthesis, which is a critical step in arriving at a final value for a property. In this stage, the appraiser reconciles the three different valuation approaches, typically the cost approach, sales comparison approach, and income approach. Each approach provides a value indication, but they may not all be equally relevant or reliable for every property. The appraiser carefully weighs the strengths and weaknesses of each approach, considering factors such as the type of property, the quality and availability of data, and the intended use of the appraisal. By blending these indications based on this analysis, the appraiser forms a well-supported final opinion of value. This final value is essentially a weighted average that reflects the best estimate of the property's worth, grounded in a thorough and logical reconciliation process. Let's wrap up by focusing on the key takeaways from our discussion. The most important point is to master all three approaches to value. First, the income approach is essential when cash flow is the main driver of an asset's value. It helps us understand what the asset is truly worth based on its ability to generate income. Next, the market approach allows us to test that value against real-world transactions, showing what buyers are actually willing to pay. This grounds our valuation in current market conditions. Finally, the cost approach anchors value by looking at land, replacement costs, and depreciation, giving us a tangible sense of an asset's baseline worth. Think of these as one toolkit with three different lenses, each providing a unique perspective that, when combined, gives us a well-rounded and accurate valuation. To wrap up, the key takeaway here is that combining three different lenses, income, market, and cost, gives you a much clearer and more reliable understanding of value. When you understand the math behind these approaches, your confidence grows, and you're able to make better, more disciplined decisions. It's about blending these perspectives to develop one stronger, more defensible judgment that truly stands up to scrutiny. This disciplined approach to value is what drives smarter choices and better outcomes.